G'day everyone, and welcome to this information snippet about the SSI Fire Water Mapathon, lined up for the 31st of October 2020 and running for a full 24 hours around the globe. Find out more at ssi.org.au/events. This mapathon is leveraging the power of citizen science to collect information on static water supply infrastructure to help in bushfire preparedness efforts. In late 2019 and early 2020, Australia was hit by horrific megafires, and since then, fires have been burning around the world. SSI are grateful to our sponsors, without which this mapathon would not be possible. The Victorian Government, Geoscience Australia, ICSM, Nearmap, NGIS, the Grow Data Foundation, and the International Federation of Surveyors Volunteer Community Surveyors Program. Joining us today, we have Nathan Eaton, Managing Director of NGIS, interviewed by Tom Kitto from the International Federation of Surveyors Young Surveyors Network.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this behind the scenes talk for the Firewater Mapathon. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you so much for your contributions if you have already taken part in the Mapathon. Every little bit counts and it's greatly appreciated. My name is Tom Kitto, and I am a representative of the FIG Young Surveyors Group, and I'm based in Vancouver. Joining me today is Nathan Eaton from NGIS, living in Perth, Western Australia, the remotest city in the world from what I understand. And he has been an instrumental part in the creation of the Firewater Mapathon. He has been instrumental in setting this one up and has also been involved in the previous Mapathon. How are you doing today, Nathan?
Thanks, Tom. How are you, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. It's a sunny day here, and yeah, it's looking like snow on the mountains. So pretty much the opposite to where you guys are, and I think we're on the opposite sides of the world. But I'm glad we could make this happen. So Nathan, I was just going to kick it off with, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Well, we know I've just said you're from Perth, but what do you do for work, and how have you got involved in these Mapathons?
So yeah, I do work for NGIS Australia. So we're a dedicated geospatial company. So very much a geospatial person at heart. And so based in Perth, I've been with the company for quite a while now. And my role is to basically work with clients to identify solutions and to help them build out those solutions that impact their business. In terms of how I got involved in this Mapathon, I was actually involved in the previous Mapathon for the Australian bushfires earlier in the year through SSI and particularly Dr. Leslie Arnold. So I got involved early for that Mapathon to really help set up the systems and help to mobilise what that ended up becoming, which was really successful in getting 600 registrations and really helping to mobilise the spatial community in Australia. So I've been involved for quite a while, and I think the success of that initial Mapathon this year was really around the impact that we had in terms of bringing people together and allowing the spatial community to contribute in Australia. So that was a big tick. So it's kind of like, yeah, we've got the people, we've got the momentum. And this next Mapathon was, well, how do we make the most impact? So, and for us, the impact for this next Mapathon is really largely around, well, what does the government need in terms of geospatial data, and how does that geospatial data impact what they're going to need to do in the upcoming fire season? And those were two things that we worked pretty hard on to make sure that what we're going to do for this next Mapathon was going to be high value.
Well, it sounds like, yeah, you set yourself up for a pretty good kickboard on this particular Mapathon with the success of the last one. So do you want to run us through a little bit of what you're actually doing to make this Mapathon happen for those who may not be familiar?
Yep, no drama. So very similar process and platform to the previous Mapathon. So we're leveraging the OpenStreetMap HotMapper platform, which is fantastic for Mapathons. So it really helps us manage all of the users and then allowing users to pick certain areas to then digitize information from. And that end-to-end workflow really works quite well. So then some of the work we're doing behind the scenes is to get the fundamental information that we need to be able to digitize information. So for this next mapathon, we're focusing on water infrastructure. So dams, pools, tanks that can be leveraged for firefighting activities. So, and what we're trying to do in the first part is to be able to identify where they are. So it's really a case of having good resolution aerial photography to be able to then digitize that information. So digitize where the tanks actually are on scale. And so we set up the platform to be able to do that. And we work with the different data providers to be able to get their information into that platform. And in this particular mapathon, we've worked with the Victorian government to highlight some of those priority areas. So areas that are covering national parks, so Victoria parks, and areas that weren't burnt last year, so they've got a higher fire risk this year. So we do a lot of that work in terms of prioritising the area, using GIS to do that, and then working with the data providers to get their information inside the platform.
Fantastic, and a big shout out to Nearmap for providing that information as well. The high resolution imagery, from what you've said, is a pretty key component, especially when we're trying to find some sometimes difficult to see or smaller water resources. Now,
definitely. And just so on that, the previous mapathon that we had, we used some great satellite imagery from Planet and Airbus as well, and they were fantastic sponsors. And they allowed us to get really great coverage of information that you can't get through aerial as readily. Whereas this mapathon, we do want to really digitize those specific water tanks, which are not really significantly large features. So that high resolution is important. So thanks very much to the team in Nearmap.
Yeah, for sure. Now, one other thing that people may not be super aware of when they're contributing to this mapathon is that their data might be used to train AI. So do you want to talk to us about how you're using AI in this mapathon?
Yeah, and this came out largely from the previous mapathon again, where we mobilised the community, we allowed them to do heads-up digitising, but obviously there's fantastic geospatial professionals that were involved, and we were just questioning, well, how do we do things a little bit better? So it's very manual to create all this data to start off with. How do we make the most of that? So what we're now doing for this mapathon is focusing on still capturing that fundamental information, so digitising those dams, pools and tanks, but then using that as training data to be able to put into machine learning models to then scale that out to a larger area. So I think for this mapathon, our projects, I think we've got 7 projects overall, East Kangaroo Island and then across Victoria. We're covering around 1.2 million hectares. But the idea being that we then have this fantastic asset, which is the training data, to be able to apply to machine learning models to actually scale this out so we can do automated capture and identification of these features. So try and use some of those value-added geospatial workflows that, as I said, a lot of the people involved in the previous mapathon were really keen to see us do.
Well, that's just some phenomenal areas you're talking about there. You know, we're looking at mapping 1.2 million hectares, I think you mentioned, is the scope of this mapathon, and then to think that that will then be able to be leveraged to measure even more of Australia, or to collect water resource information on even more of Australia. So tell me, are there any limitations to the use of artificial intelligence in this context?
Really with AI, and I do defer to our machine learning experts, but they tell me that it's largely built on the quantity and the quality of the training data that you have. So that's the number of features, but also the variety of features. When you're looking at dams, they'll actually vary greatly in terms of their appearance, and also they vary geographically in terms of the surrounding areas. So it's the amount of data that we can get will largely impact the quality of the outputs and the quality of the model in many ways, which we think is a fantastic role that SSSI is playing to mobilise the geospatial community to get that fundamental data. And that does largely have to be manually digitised. And it's a lot of the heavy lifting required for machine learning. So the ability to use a mapathon like this to create this fundamental information, and it also contributes to the OpenStreetMap data as well. That it's then the first part to then the machine learning afterwards, I think is going to be a really good fit to how we want to create impact through these activities.
Fantastic. And you know, you mentioned that this is sort of this is going to be, I guess, a start off point that you'll be able to then map more water resources around Australia. What about around the world? Is this a model that could be adopted for other bushfire prone areas around the world, or could this data even be used?
Oh, definitely. And you'd need to look at training data in other geographies to obviously improve the quality of the model. I think the whole approach of using the community and using a mapathon to then build this data out, I really like that flow. And I think it's a really positive way that the community can contribute together, particularly geospatial in Australia and then globally. So I really do like that flow for sure, Tom.
Yeah, and it really maximises the value of the work that's being done by all of our contributors. Well, I think we'll leave it at that, Nathan. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today, and thank you so much for all the work that you've done along with SSSI. I think it needs to be mentioned that this is SSSI's initiative, and they've done so much work to make this mapathon happen and the one before. So thank you to you, and thank you to SSSI, and look forward to doing some mapping with you.
Yeah, good on you, Tom. Thanks, mate.
Cheers. Catch you later.